When I was a kid, I was super into Superman.
We grab onto our heroes that are a little bit like us.
There's the appeal of just seeing someone who's fully able to gallivant across the world, you know?
The whole spying genre, there's something inherently queer about that.
That was really big for me, was women kicking ass.
Linda Hamilton did it first.
Power Rangers. I was mesmerized with this idea of such a quick transformation.
It's fun to look at these people, but at the end of the day, I'm Jean Grey.
This is the AV Club's Why We Love, an examination into the sometimes subconscious reasons we're drawn to our pop culture obsessions. In this special Pride edition, celebrities and thought leaders look back at the action heroes they emulated for more than just their heroic deeds. Beyond the spandex and gadgets, these figures helped LGBTQ people navigate who they were and who they wanted to be. This is Why We Love Pride edition.
The 1980s had this late Cold War roided up mentality that shaped my sexual taste more than I am comfortable with. But so much of it was He-Man and superheroes. They were ripped. They wore clothes that just clung to all of their parts. And if you were going to draw something, that was sort of what you were supposed to draw. So it really was the earliest comfortable sexual ideation that I was able to do. It really did sort of infect my sexual fantasies for the first couple of years.
The thrill and escapism resonated really strongly with me. I was super into the Batmans that no one else was into. I love Joel Schumacher Batman movies. That is not the popular opinion. I love Uma Thurman. Do I love Uma Thurman when she's got leaves for eyebrows more? Yes!
You two boys aren't gonna start fighting over little old me now, are you?
When it came down to identifying with or imagining myself a superhero, it was always the lady empathy powers. It's fun to look at these people, but at the end of the day, I'm Jean Grey.
For a very long time, my favorite color kind of depended on the Power Ranger. I'd say my favorite color is red because I really wanted to be the red Power Ranger. I wanted to be that one.
Rogue. I am rogue. I don't know if you heard my answer. Ultimately very powerful, but it means she's set apart. Congratulations to Disney for finding the plot of Frozen in Rogue's story. Yeah, I think that feels very queer. It feels like a queer kid. I also was really obsessed with Colossus as a kid. His power is he just gets bigger and more made of metal. But, for being a little guy, that was if I played the arcade game, I was always Colossus.
I think all kids try out different relationships to gender or start to begin to see where they can map themselves onto the spectrum of genders that they encounter. Before online culture began, we had to find avatars. We had to find figures that we could project ourselves into. I was super into Superman. And so when I was around 4 years old, I want to say, I basically ran around the house with a towel tucked behind my t-shirt. Superman moves from Clark Kent to Superman. I wanted to move from the ordinary to the extraordinary. And just shoving a towel down the back of my shirt and that little bit of fantasy, that little bit of play, that little bit of kind of costume joy helped me do that.
I learned all the morphing sequences for Power Rangers for a really long time. That was at a time when I wasn't out as trans. I was just a very, very masculine tomboy. And I'm sure, on some level it was about masculinity and about superheroes, and in my 8-year-old brain being really excited that girl Power Rangers, some of them got to kick butt, but then they were in skirts. And I just remember being I don't want that. What purpose does a skirt serve if you're already all suited up? I mean, does it make your kicks any better? I don't think so. What stood out to me though, was more the hero costumes. I remember being so fascinated. And again, I knew in my 8-year-old brain that they weren't just a flash and they just were in their costumes. I knew there had to be editing, all these things, but I was mesmerized with this idea of such a quick transformation.
It's not an accident that so many of these categories of the things that we love have to do with exploring a public self and a private self, knowing when you could be a certain way in the broader culture and when you did your true work, what you were there and called to this earth for. You were there spying, you were there karate chopping villains a la the Charlie's Angels and that kind of thing.
The whole spying genre, there's something inherently queer about that. Spy stories are inherently stories about a search for identity, because often spies are having a crisis of identity. It's very existential. You know, what am I doing this job for? Why am I doing all these horrible things? I spend day in, day out disguised, using aliases, when I can't really be myself.
When masculinity is expressed within a spectrum that is about this wide, the things that Bond cares about are things that I think we now sort of position within the queer community. He cares about what he wears. He cares about how it fits him. He cares about like how he moves through a room. Like he's very in his body and wearing trim, tailored things.
It's fun just seeing a character who seems to have some sense of style. There's the appeal of just seeing someone who's fully able to gallivant across the world, you know?
The fact that that person is straight, I think bought a lot of men, like across the board, some larger expression.
Halle Berry, you know, I was obsessed with Halle Berry, like would literally risk it all for Halle Berry. But I remember her walking out of the water in that burnt orange bathing suit. Like, that's iconic, you know? Just as much as Bond, the Bond girls play a significant role in making those movies significant as well.
There's something really, really performative about James Bond's masculinity. And I think that's probably helped by the fact that 6 men have played the character. There's a big difference between those performances, and I think that probably appealed to me. I saw that James Bond could change. He was constantly undergoing something of an identity crisis. I've never had an issue with that, and I think it is because I've always seen James Bond as performing in a way.
Watching Xena as it was airing definitely did something to my brain. I was like, this lady is cool and she has a sword and she fights. I was like really into like medieval times and Dungeons and Dragons and whatever. But also these ladies sleep next to each other every single night on their like kind of single bedroll under their single fur. What's up? We have like reality or like everyone's personally curated version of reality being like jammed into our rods and cones nonstop all day, every day, scroll, scroll, scroll. And there's something like kind of purifying about stepping into a world where evil is more clearly defined and the ways in which you fight evil are more clearly defined. And the good guys usually win.
I guess one of the big turning points for me, like when my mind felt fully blown in a really big way, was seeing Buffy the movie. And I remember seeing that with my older sisters and their older friends. And I think it kicked off this whole obsession with, I was obsessed with women who did backflips and who kicked ass. And it just became this whole genre. And whenever that happened on screen, I was just fully drawn to it. Another huge thing for me was in that same world, but a little bit grittier, was Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2 was huge for me. And she also had that son who felt kind of gay, but I'm not sure if he was. They never specified.
Here's why Terminator 1 and 2 is one of the most interesting sequel situations of all time, is that the damsel in distress becomes the hunter. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like, even in Alien, like, Ripley's kind of a badass from the beginning. The idea that then, oh my God, a female Terminator, it just brought the whole thing full circle. But the fact that she's like doing the chin-ups in the mental institution, that's all amazing.
Like, I'd never seen a woman doing pull-ups on screen before, and that felt so powerful. They could kick ass, but they could also be feminine, and they could like say stuff about like hair products, and they could like wear fabulous clothes, and they can go shopping at the mall, but then also kill a demon. It felt like everything I loved, like sort of like wrapped into one. Feels like it's telling my story, even though I'm not a woman, nor do I slay demons. It felt like it was tapping into something that was true.
I think pop culture, what it does is that it gives us different pictures of gender, different idealizations of that through whatever society values at that given moment. But it also shows us moments that push up against what's valued by mainstream culture and the broader society.
My sci-fi example would be Doctor Who. Shows like that are all about awakening. Now the doctor is a woman, but also is she or are they is my own non-binary insertion, because the doctor is able to regenerate, which is like an ability for obviously actors to take over the role and let it exist for decades, but also is a way to sort of think about the many facets that we have inside of ourselves, because each doctor has a slightly different personality, right? They're not trying to be the same guy or person. But I really appreciate sci-fi shows like that are able to be like, well, who can you be now?
Charmed is how I found my name. I was at a time when I was coming out and like trying to figure out what fit. And I looked at Charmed and I was like, this character, his name is Leo. You know, maybe I'm not trying to be a paragon of good, but like I want to be a good person and I want to have like a well-developed moral compass. And I felt like he kind of represented that. And I feel like he represented also kind of in terms of a magical world and like fantasy world where it's so male dominated or men dominated, like he's a man in this show, but he's not like the leading man. He often deferred to the judgment of the people he worked with who were women.
That's what's so cool about pop culture in its own little way. And what it means to, I think, especially people who are othered, like what pop culture means to us is really unique and specific because we grab onto our heroes that are a little bit like us. Indiana Jones was a big hero of mine. He was this really smart professor during the day, and at night or in the weekends, he'd go and he'd save the Ark of the Covenant and protect it for people to learn. What a great belongs in a museum, right? What a great moment. Back to the Future was another moment.
1955. You're my mom.
I just saw myself in Marty. Whether it was that I was already that or that I wanted to be that, I don't really know. It's probably both. It's just the queer experience of finding yourself in things that don't explicitly include you. The experience of going like, I can take what I like from that and I can leave the rest of it, which is like, I relate to this. I relate to like, this person is attracted to me and they shouldn't be, and this is wrong, so I gotta go somewhere else. Like, the movie speaks to me, even though it's not written about me for me,
Sci-fi for me was an idealized world. If we're talking about Star Trek, which is what I was watching, right? Star Trek offered a view and a peek at a future in which someone like me could succeed and could be an equal member of society with no fear. It was a prayer in a lot of ways. It was a way of having a conversation with myself about how to get our world closer to that one.
Sometimes it's aspirational, sometimes it's something that we wish to be, but sometimes it's also something that we are that calls to us. It could be their confidence, their sassiness, their intelligence and incisiveness that we recognize about ourselves that doesn't seem like the thing that everybody else is, but that we feel we are.
As queer people, we exercise that sort of creative muscle a little bit, perhaps earlier than some people get to, especially the era that we're talking about. Like now, there's queer characters all the time, and I'm just like, what the hell's going on? But, like throughout older stuff, like you had to like kind of dig and you had to like find yourself in it. And I think both are great,